Last time we met, I reviewed Rayman 3 Hoodlum Havoc, which was the last mainline Rayman game for 8 years. 8 years, I hear you ask? What caused blonde-hair McFloaty Hands to vanish for the rest of the 2000s? Well, he didn't quite vanish per se, he was just put aside for a while. You see, after Rayman 3's release, Ubisoft hired a company called Phoenix Interactive to create the next mainline Rayman game, none other than Rayman 4. Mind you, Phoenix Interactive had a portfolio of mostly licensed games, so to get the opportunity to make the next game in what was a high-profile IP at the time was huge for the small dev studio, even if it was probably because the Montpellier studio that was responsible for the previous titles was busy making a King Kong video game for some reason. What Phoenix Interactive had in mind was absolutely wild, involved callbacks to previous games, and is far more than I can mention in just this video specifically, but let's just cut to the chase and say this never came out. It was cancelled due to the impending release of the Nintendo Wii, then called the Nintendo Revolution. With Ubisoft not being so sure about how successful a new release for the Nintendo GameCube would be, well, these titles being Rayman 4, the game ended up being cancelled, and a new Rayman game for the Wii was put into development at Ubisoft Montpellier, because they had just finished the King Kong video game and were available. What was initially planned was another action platformer like Rayman 3, where evil bunnies try to take over Rayman's world. You had to fight a ton of them in horde battles, kind of like Dynasty Warriors, but with more platforming and more of this guy. There would have been power-ups like Rayman 3, a bunch of ways to fight enemies, costumes, free-roaming gameplay, rideable vehicles, and animals. And when this trailer was first shown off at E3 in 2005, Rayman fans were like, wow, that's rad! And then we got a party game. Yep, due to time constraints relating to the Wii's launch, the platformer shown in 2005 could not be made in time for the deadline. So they just threw together what was made into a party game, which released on time for the Wii's holiday 2006 launch date. People were not happy. This is not what fans wanted from the series. Although, interestingly enough, the Game Boy Advance and Nintendo DS versions actually are platformers, but I'm not gonna get too deep into this whole thing. Rayman Raving Rabbids, the game that was released, sold incredibly well, leading to Ubisoft making more Raving Rabbids titles, with Rayman becoming less and less important. To the point, Rayman stopped even being playable by the third game, and eventually the series were split. By this point, Rayman 3 was still the last mainline game. But eventually, by the turn of the decade, a new proper mainline Rayman game was about to release. It was intended to go back to the series' roots, being a 2D platformer, the first one to be released on the home console since the very first Rayman game. Initially, the game was set for a digital-only, episodic release on the PlayStation Store and Xbox Live Arcade, with the first episode intended for release in late 2010. Eventually, the game was delayed so that it could be released as a full retail title. Finally, after 8 years between mainline Rayman games, Rayman Origins was released on November 15th, 2011 for PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and Wii. Handheld ports would also be released the following year, starting with a release as a launch title for the PlayStation Vita on February 15th, 2012, as well as a port to the Nintendo 3DS on June 7th, 2012. It also received a Windows port, seeing release 4 months after the initial console release on March 29th, 2012. The game received widespread critical acclaim for its graphics, music, controls, level design, and content, ushering in a short renaissance for the series in the early 2010s. But is this praise justified or overblown? Let's find out. The story is practically non-existent. One day, Rayman is sleeping as always, but it turns out there's a microphone that's been deviously placed by the hero's designated sleep branch. It leads down to the land of the living dead, where its inhabitants have been hearing the protagonist snore for God knows how long and declare war against the people of the Glade of Dreams. They successfully capture Rayman, Glowbox, and 2 teensies, and now you have to regain all of your powers. Also, the Electums have been captured. At the end of the game, it turns out the magician that's been giving you tutorials the entire game is actually the bad guy. Then you chase him down, he causes this thing to blow up, and we're back to where we started. I know story is not the focal point in platformers, but this story is so bare bones, it's easy to forget there's a point to you doing all of this. Easily one of the worst things about Origins. To lighten the mood a bit, let's switch to the game's presentation. Firstly, visuals, and boy howdy is this game a looker. Rayman Origins boasts hand-drawn visuals, and they look masterful. Environments are lush, detailed, and pop off the screen, and the game takes on a charming new art style. It really looks like a playable cartoon, and it's one of the game's best qualities by far. And due to it being fully 2D, the game is able to run at 1080p and 60 frames per second, a great achievement for 7th gen hardware. Even on the less powerful machines, it can run at that system's full resolution and at 60 frames per second without too much trouble. The music is pretty great too. The music is very cheery and whimsical, fitting its new cartoony art style. But when things get serious, the music changes accordingly. Every track fits its location like a glove. The Desert of Didgeridoos has mystic flute melodies in the background as you fly around. Gourmandland has bossa nova tunes in the upper ice areas and very Mexican-inspired music in the lower fire areas. The Sea of Serendipity has a choir of alums singing a jaunty and adorable tune that gets replaced by progressively subtler, eerier music as you venture deeper into the sea, and a whole lot more where that came from. Pretty much every song is memorable, and the soundtrack is consistently high quality. It's the only Rayman game to have a physical soundtrack release to this day. It is a great set of tunes, perhaps my favorite in the entire franchise. It's just that good. But the most important part of the game is playing it, so let's see if this release brings the goods. As previously stated, Rayman Origins is a classic-style 2D platformer. You're going from point A to B, collecting lumps and avoiding obstacles and levels that become progressively more difficult as the game reaches its end. The works. The series staple of Cage's return, this time containing Electoons. There are 3 in each level, with 1 required for a base finish of the stage. Additionally, a certain amount of Electoons are required for progressing to the next world. Additionally, 2 more Electoons will be rewarded to the player for finishing the level with a certain amount of lumps, and the 6th can be attained in time trial challenges that unlock after finishing the level for the first time. Think the time trials in Crash Bandicoot. Extra challenge stages where players are tasked with chasing a sentient treasure chest through a short but brutally difficult level are unlocked for amassing large amounts of Electoons. There's 246 Electoons in total, the highest amount of cages in a Rayman game up to this point. Changing gears for a second, good lord, this game feels so good to play. The controls are buttery smooth, they're as tight and responsive as you could ever dream of. This may sound a bit hyperbolic, but this is one of the best controlling games I've ever had the pleasure of playing. That alone makes it even more enjoyable to go through the levels, which are great on their own. Every level is masterfully designed, with clear, well-thought-out layouts with creative designs. Every level is memorable in its own unique way, with a smooth difficulty curve offering difficult, but 100% fair challenge, hint hint, in the latter parts of the game. This is also the first Rayman with multiplayer, likely influenced by the uptake of co-op 2D platformers during the late 2000s and early 2010s. Up to 4 players can experience the entire thing together. It can get a tad chaotic at times, but it's still a really fun game to play with some friends. The game has a total of 66 levels, split across 10 different areas. We have the jungle-themed Gibberish Jungle, the music and desert-themed Desert of Didgeridoos, the flame, ice, and food-themed Gourmandland, the ocean-themed Sea of Serendipity, the snowy mountains of Mystical Peak, the steampunk airship of Moody Clouds, but before you can access that area, you must first complete 4 additional worlds. The jungle-themed Ticklish Temples, the music and desert-themed Grumbling Grottos, the flame, ice, and food-themed Luscious Lakes, the ocean-themed Angsty Abyss. Yeah, this is the problem. For some ungodly reason, almost half of the game's worlds are visually identical to worlds in the first half. Why? Why would they do this? Yeah, the levels do make more use of more of the complete moveset, and it's more content in the long run, but it makes the game feel thematically repetitive. I mean, come on, can you tell the aesthetic difference between these 2 levels from World 1 and World 6? No? You can't? That's because these worlds both use the same jungle assets, but also partially because I switched them around. It's the game's worst aspect by far. Anyway, you defeat the bosses, of which there are only like 5 for some reason, and you can finally access the airship in the Moody Clouds. After you finish all the levels, you find the mastermind behind it all. It's the Magician, the character you met multiple times throughout the game. He takes the star off his hat, which of course means he's evil. You then refight every boss in mechanized form, chase down the Magician, everything explodes, credits. Well, that's one way to end the game, but wait, there's more! Completing a treasure chest chase will reward you with a skull tooth. They're completely useless on their own, but collecting all 10 will grant you access to one more level. The Land of the Livid Dead. A complete reimagining of the area. Gone are the peaceful plains and deep blue oceans of the area from the same name of Hoodlum Havoc, replaced with something far more desolate. It's also the hardest level in the game, testing your skill immensely. It is crazy difficult, but extremely satisfying to master and overcome. You don't really get anything for beating it aside from an achievement or trophy, but it's still worth playing anyway. Overall, Rayman Origins is a delight. In spite of its near complete lack of a narrative and reuse of elements, it shines with its perfect control, upbeat mood, gorgeous 2D graphics, memorable soundtrack, and rock-solid level design. It's a fantastic 2D platformer that's entirely worth playing, whether it's your first or your 100th. That's why I award Rayman Origins with a 9.5 out of 10 and a Silver Award. It's a joy to play, and you're only doing a disservice to yourself by skipping it. So that's my review of Rayman Origins, a magnificent 2D rebirth of the Limbless Wonder. The next video, however, will be time for this retrospective's curtain call. Next time, the Rayman retrospective ends with my review of Rayman Legends, the last mainline Rayman game ever released. But until then, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like or subscribing to the channel to be in the know of future uploads, and leave your feedback down in the comments below. This has been BlueBlur98, signing off.